From this session, we are going to see what is ASP.NET and how to work with ASP.NET. I think most of you have already worked with ASP.NET before, but still bear with me while I go through the basics once again. Okay, so ASP.NET is something which is a web-based or web technology offered from Microsoft. Okay, so we are going to see what it is and how do we use C# in that, and how do you develop web applications, dynamic ones, using ASP.NET anymore. Okay, so we will be working with C# as a programming language, but we are going to not use a console application hereafter. We'll be using that in a web application. Logic does not change in any of these type of applications. Let's just jump into ASP.NET's introduction. In this class, I'm only going to give you a basic overview of what is ASP.NET. From the next class onwards, we'll be starting a little bit more deep into ASP.NET and its working. So let's see what we are going to what am I planning to see in these future sessions is we need to see what is ASP.NET, how it works, the architecture, the execution, how do you create forms using that, etc., etc. Now, before I proceed with further with this, last semester, not the last, I think the third semester, you had learned something called JSP. All right, so we use Java as the language, but we try to develop web applications using Java. Okay, so that technology, we use the word JSP, servlets, JSF, whatever you have learned with that particular respect. Okay, so that is Java's way of giving you a web application. Now, what we are going to see is ASP.NET, which is again same idea, but the language here is not Java, it's going to be C#. That's all. All right, but then the working process is totally changed with respect to how we have been seeing web technologies so far. But by the way, again, I'm insisting on one more thing. What I am covering in this syllabus is ASP.NET, not ASP.NET Core. I hope you get the difference. Okay, there is ASP.NET Core, which is coming up, and it's still, I mean, right now it's the market, but then your syllabus does not cover .NET Core. It just says ASP.NET. So we'll be seeing ASP.NET, but this is the basis learning this, you may not find it difficult to get used to .NET Core. Okay, so let me just continue. In order to understand ASP.NET, the first thing you need to know is how the web works. Okay, I'm not going to talk about .NET for a while. It's just in general web technologies. How do web technologies work, and how does in general web technologies work? That's something which you already know. You have learned it, I think, probably using PHP, using Python, using Java. You have learned it in different fashions. We are just going to quickly revise that. Okay, in order to make sure that the web or the World Wide Web, WWW, works, you have something called client, you have something called server. The clients are connected to the servers over the internet. That's as simple as we can say. All right, and they communicate with each other using HTTP. I guess this also is familiar to you, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. All right, basically you're just transferring text over the internet and you communicate with many machines. All right, so normally a client sends the request in HTTP format, and for a source, like maybe it's a HTML, maybe it's an image, maybe it's a JavaScript, maybe it's CSS, whatever it is, you as a client, you will give a request, and as the server, it will give you a response. Okay, this I've been stressing as much as possible in while we saw Java. Again, I'm repeating, it is client, server, request, response. Okay, please don't forget that the pattern or the flow in which it goes. Okay, so that is important. This is something which you need to know. Now, what are clients and what are servers? I think I need not stress much upon this, because you already know clients is something which is like a web browser. We have it. We have it in our personal computers. We have it in our mobile phones. We have it in different devices, what we use, in any device we use mostly. All right. So what is a server? A server is, by the way, there are two things. Whenever we study technologies and then we see this, we never refer to the hardware server. Okay, but please note, when I say server, it can mean two things: hardware as well as the software. A hardware is something which we see that it's not a regular computer. It's not a normal PC which you see in everybody's home, but rather a server is a little bit more powerful. Not little bit, actually, it's a bit more powerful system which runs in a particular location, which we cannot afford to buy for as a normal PC. All right, so it's a little bit costly. It's a little bit more powerful. It's a heavy built server which runs probably in a remote location or some location, but we communicate to that as clients to that particular machine. And that's a hardware part I'm talking about. But then when you develop, okay, when you are developing an application, like for example, most of you would have used XAMPP or WAMP. In NetBeans, we use something called Apache, Glassfish, and then you have Tomcat. Like that, lot of servers we have come across. Those are also called servers, but they are not hardware. They are software servers, okay, which runs inside an actual hardware server later. So while we develop, we use something called as a testing server. Right, we run it on our own machine, and then we make sure that it works and all those things. Okay, so in so far, what and all servers you have come across, I'll just give you a glance. One is Apache, of course. If you used WAMP or XAMPP, that A in WAMP or XAMPP stands for Apache. And if you have used J2EE, you would have come across Glassfish or Tomcat. Again, these are all servers. Some people would have come across Nginx. Okay, there is Oracle's WebLogic. There are a lot of servers available. We will be choosing one which is suitable for us. Now, if you see in the list what I have given, there is something new, not new for many of you, but for some of you it might be new. Internet Information Services, IIS server, that runs only on Windows right now. Okay, .NET Core has changed it a little bit better, but since I am talking from the angle of ASP.NET, the original one, so I'm going to just say that Internet Information Services, they apply on Windows only. They are Windows based servers, which means you cannot run this in anything else. IIS normally runs only .NET based applications. Extra one add-on is PHP. It allows you to run PHP also. So these are different servers which we come across. Okay, when I say server, there are two aspects: client, the hardware as well as the software. But whatever we refer here will be the software version of it. Okay. Now, normally, how does a static page work? Okay, that is, I think, very familiar to all of you. You have a web browser, you request for an HTML file. Okay, just to run an HTML file, you don't even require a server. If you remember, like for example, if I create a HTML file on my desktop and I double click on it, it will still work. But if I write a PHP file on my desktop and I double click on it, it will not work. It might open in a browser, but it might not show you what output you are looking for. Rather, it will just show the code as it is. Okay, so please understand the difference here. Web browser, static pages. Normally, when I say static page, I mean that it does not do any operations on the server side. So you will be just giving it as a static page, mostly HTML. All right. So look at this. This is the simple procedure. You request for a HTML page. I'll give you that HTML page. Nothing else happening. This is a static page. When I say I'll give you the same page, which means whatever code you have written and kept in that HTML file will be given as it is, which means no conversion, no parsing, no compiling. Whatever is there in that HTML on your server will be exactly given to the client, and the client will be able to read everything which is written in that HTML page. That's a simple static page retrieval. You have a request, you have a response. But when you run it in your system, you don't have this. You just double click on that HTML file and it runs in your browser. Okay, that is not retrieval. It is just single page and you are just working on your system. But on the internet, when I host a website, when I have a home page which is written in HTML, if I have the extension as .html, normally your web browser, web server will not process it, will not parse it. Rather, it will just give it to you as it is if it is .html. Okay, but if it is anything else apart from .html or HTML, it will take you through that web server, whatever you have installed, maybe Apache or maybe IIS, whatever you have. It will go through that server and the server has to parse it and convert it back to HTML so that the browser will understand. Whatever technology you use in the second step, it doesn't matter because whatever goes back should purely be HTML. That's what we have learned and I'm revising it once again. Just have a glance of this. This is a dynamic page retrieval. Okay, instead of using a simple static page, what if I used PHP? What if I used JSP? What if I used Python? What if I used .NET or any other language which I like on the server side? Okay, I guess in the semester where we learned Java technology, web technology, J2EE, I've said specifically why we should use server-side technology or when we should go for server-side technology. It's very important to understand when to use client-side and when to use server-side. It is very important, not just because it is .NET. It is in general, any website you develop, you need to be aware of what can be done through the client and what should be done in the server. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, web client is there and you give a request. Okay. Please note on the top, it says HTTP request. Okay. You can ignore that SSL and clear text and all. Just remember it is HTTP request. You give it. Okay. And firewall. Okay. That is something which is available even in static page. But why I have not shown it, or why they have not bothered much to show it in a static page retrieval, is because normally firewalls will not parse base text based application or text based requests. Okay, but when it comes to a dynamic page, firewall becomes a very important part of us, because if you see that if it is just a HTML page and it's local drive, I don't require a firewall. But when I put it on the server and I expect lot of people to access it, it's always recommended to keep a firewall, and it will be normally done by the hosting service. Don't worry about this. So I'll just ignore that part. And then you are touching the web server. Okay, the web server, when I say, please don't think it's a hardware. I am talking about the software here. Like at the bottom, you can see Apache, IIS, Netscape Navigator. There are a lot of other servers available. You can even include a Glassfish there. But then idea is still the same, web server. And that web server will be hosting a lot of web apps. Okay, normally what we develop is we have, I think, those who have worked with WAMP or XAMPP, you see that you will be creating web applications in that folder called www or htdocs. Okay, but one Apache server will be running, and you will have different folders in that htdocs or www folder. Okay, like that. On the server also, I can have n number of web apps, and those n number of web apps can interact with databases. That is one of the most important advantage of using a dynamic page. Okay, a dynamic website or a server-side scripting or server-side programming language. Okay, so you have plugins. When I say plugins, it means just programming languages. Any languages you can use: Perl, Python, C, C++, JSP, ASP.NET, whatever you are using. It will be developed using that particular language, web application, which will in turn be able to talk to databases using one of those database connections like JDBC. Here we are going to use ADO.NET. Like that, lot of technologies are available, which comes as a bridge between your application and the database. Okay, I hope this is clear, which is just a revision of what we have seen so far. Okay, this has nothing to do with ASP.NET as such. This is in general for any technology you would like to learn regarding websites or web app development. This idea, how it works, is very, very important. Please do remember this. The next slide, I'm just trying to tell you what are the possible web solutions currently available. Okay, now I just told you that server-side scripting or dynamic programming is required in order to get you a dynamic web page, or not just a static website. You want a dynamic website, you need to use a server-side technology. When you want to use a server-side technology, you should see what are the options available. Okay, I'm just going to list out all the possible web solutions we have currently. Okay, there is something called Adobe Cold Fusion. Okay, which was very famous once upon a time. And then you have CGI. Okay, I think some of you would have used this if you wanted to execute web applications using Python without Django or Flask. Okay, that is CGI. It allows you to what do you call execute web applications with C, C++, and etc. other languages. Okay, it's common gateway interface, by the way. And third one is J2W, Java based technologies. Okay, this includes everything from JSP, Servlet, JSF, Spring, Struts, Hibernate, whatever you are using with Java based. Okay, Java can be a very popular web solution. Okay, Java is still the web possible or not possible. It's the best web solutions available even now. Okay, so that is one. And then you have JavaScript based. I think you're learning this this semester. There are a lot of JavaScript based server side technologies available. Okay, it's possible to do server side programming using Node.js. You will be coming across that shortly. And then you have PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, all are scripting languages. Okay, you can see that there is PHP and Python you have learned. Somehow I think you would have learned. The ones which I have highlighted is what you would have learned in this college. Okay, PHP, Python. I think PHP for the laterals, I think you might not have. But anyway, you have got this much technologies to learn web technologies, especially. I think for you, Python was with Django. So PHP, I don't think so. You would have learned Laravel, but there are frameworks. But still, these are all scripting languages possible, which will give you a web solution. Okay, a dynamic web solution. And then comes what we are going to come across. But please note, the one which I have not highlighted is the old version of ASP. It's called .ASP, Microsoft Active Server Pages, ASP. That's all. Okay, that's old. Just like how you differentiate between VB and VB.NET, we have ASP and ASP.NET. Both are not the same, guys. Remember that. ASP is the older version of Microsoft's web solution. But when it comes to right now, it is .NET Core, by the way. But still, what we are learning is the advanced version of ASP, which is ASP.NET. These are the possible web solutions. There might be more I've not included, but I've just put a little bit famous ones in front of you. Just have a glance of all these technologies. These are the various ways in which you can develop a web application which is dynamic. That's all I can say. Now, which technology should I choose? That depends on your company, your project, okay, the requirements they give. Lot of things are there. You'll have to consider a lot of things before choosing any one of these web solutions. Okay. Now, we are going to learn .NET because it's there in our syllabus. But then you would have learned all these technologies because it is part of a particular subject. But then when you go to the real world, you will get requirements based on a particular situation, a real world situation where you would have to think and immediately execute which is better. Okay, which technology would be safer, reliable, secure, faster. Lot of things you will come across, and then you will choose a particular technology. So let's see why or what ASP.NET has to offer, and we'll learn that. Okay, what is ASP.NET? Okay, it's a web development platform. Just like that, it is built on .NET framework. I think the name itself gives that away. It is built on .NET platform or .NET framework platform. Okay, so and it is given by Microsoft, which is already known to you. Okay, it was there from the year 2002. Okay, and it is designed to work with HTTP, which is the standard protocol, which you already know. It allows you to use a full featured programming language. Okay, that is not possible by most of the language. For example, PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, all these are scripting languages. Okay, they're not a full-fledged programming language, but then Java, J2EE allows you to use a full-fledged programming language to develop a web application. The next alternative would be ASP.NET, which allows you to use a full-featured programming language like C# or VB.NET or J#, whatever you want to use, and then you can develop web applications easily. Okay, now always when we start with this particular web technology, everybody will say it's easy to learn, but then please note ASP.NET is really easy because it splits everything for you, and it allows you to use programming languages also in its scripting idea. Okay, let's see that. I think you'll understand why it's easy later. And the full form of ASP here is active server pages, and I think I've not told you what is the full form of .NET. Okay, some of them were asking whether it's means some of you have put that as small net, okay, or capital N then small e small t. The reason why I told you not to put that as like that is because it's an abbreviation called network enabled technologies. Dot is some people ask why the dot is put. The dot was actually meant to be a period for all other technologies. Okay, so instead of going for one language for each and every for example, if you want to develop a desktop application, you should learn VB. Web application means you should learn ASP. Like that, it was there. But when .NET came, it just put everything together and said dot, which means period for everything. And then you give network enabled technologies. Okay, these are the full forms. Let me proceed. Okay. Before we begin with any programming or any technology we'll need to learn, we need to see what are the advantages. Okay, why should I learn it? That's the biggest question. Okay, so it not because it's in syllabus, that's an obvious answer, but apart from that, why should I learn ASP.NET? What are the benefits of learning this particular technology? Okay, number one, I would put this always as number one benefit of using ASP.NET. It separates the presentation from the logic or the code. Okay, now if you have seen all recent developments, what we have seen, like for example, you have developed Android applications. Okay, when you develop Android applications, the advantage of Android application is because it has design which you write in XML, and then you have code which you write it in Java. Okay, this is which is kind of a difficult thing to achieve in web technology. For example, if you're using PHP, you can't write every HTML code in one file and write all PHP code in another file and expect them to work in all applications. It's not possible. Okay, it is kind of annoying with this part when you use web applications. But .NET provides you that right from the beginning. Okay, that we will be seeing how separates the presentation from the code. And second one is object oriented approach. I'm not saying that this is a unique feature. It is a feature available in almost all web technologies which we have. Okay. Now, component based development. This also is not a unique feature, but then still it's available in .NET in a very, very extensible and simple manner. I'll just repeat what is component based development is that instead of developing an application as such, we can focus on developing small components which can later be put together to make a full-fledged application. I'll show you that shortly, but just remember component based development. Next one. This is also not such a unique feature, but then it is unique in such a way that even in the server-side technology, you can have a very, very event-driven architecture. Okay, whatever you do, JavaScript can communicate to the server and get you the response. So event-driven architecture is that everything which you do in .NET, ASP.NET will be based on a particular event. Okay, we'll see that more in the life cycle of ASP.NET, which we'll not see today, but then later we'll be seeing that event-driven architecture. And code is compiled here. Okay, now this is something which is not there in scripting languages. If you notice that, if you use PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, these languages will not compile their code. They rather get executed. They get parsed by your server. Okay, so but Java and C# or .NET part, you see that they are compiled into something. Now, for example, if it is Java, if it is .java, you compile it into .class. Now, when it comes to .NET, okay, if I compile a program, what would be my extension? If I compile .NET application, please don't take ASP.NET. Just think what I told in the first class, that whatever we have in .NET, you use a language. Okay, when you compile that particular programming language or whatever you have written in .NET, you compile it. When you compile it, what do you get here in .NET? In Java, you get .class. In .NET, what do you get? Exe file. Perfect. Okay, so now that is the extension what you get. Now I want a little bit more technical answer. What is the exe file or the file which gets created when you compile is actually called as? Technically, what is that called as? Exe is the extension. I understand. .dll is also another extension. Please don't get confused, guys. Both are assembly. Correct, Savio. But then I'm not looking for that word. I'm looking for another word. Okay. They both, what they have mentioned, .dll and .exe are assemblies. One is a process-based assembly. The other one is a library assembly. A process is .exe, library is .dll. But then what is stored inside that is called another language, CIL. Okay. Not bitcode. Bitcode. I've never heard that. You're trying to mean bytecode, I guess. Okay, no, we won't use the word bytecode here. We use the word common intermediate language. Now, please note, even if I write an ASP.NET application, the same thing is going to happen. Okay, so when you run an ASP.NET app, or when you compile an ASP.NET application, you would either get a .dll or .exe based on your configuration. And what is stored there is again a compiled code. In other words, IL. I'm just telling the word IL because I want you to understand it is an intermediate language. Okay, it's common intermediate language, which is something which can be executed by your CLR to get the output. Now, does that logic change in ASP.NET? No, it still works the same way. I'll show you how. Okay, so that is code compilation. And why is it so important and why is it such a big feature? Is because security. Okay, the first word which comes to my mind when I say code compilation is security. Okay, anyway, extensible architecture. Now, .NET framework does not stop with whatever is coming from Visual Studio. That is something which you guys need to understand very clearly. ASP.NET or .NET in general, whenever you see Visual Studio, never think that what is there in Visual Studio is the end of .NET. No, it is an extensible framework. It is an extensible architecture. So what you see in .NET is what Microsoft is giving you. You can create your own plugin and add it to Visual Studio. You can also download a lot of plugins which are available for Microsoft outside and put it here in Visual Studio to make it work. So it's a highly extensible architecture. I'll show you examples for all these benefits later. Remember that. Okay. And the next one is built-in state management. Okay, this is going to be a separate topic for us. We'll be covering this once again. Okay, state management, the managing the state of users who are logging in and who are using your website. Taking care of this is built in ASP.NET. Please remember that. And there are a lot of other benefits also, like data binding, validation, master pages. We'll be seeing all of these every class we come across. Okay, so every class I'll be taking up one of those topics and we'll be covering how that is given from ASP.NET. We'll see that. Now, how does ASP.NET application get executed? They are executed. Please know, whenever I ask where it's getting executed, ASP.NET can never get executed on a client side because it's a server side technology. Please remember that it gets executed on the server side. And what does it give it back to you? Okay, normally PHP will return HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All other languages will try to return HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Here, also the same thing, but one small difference is there. The web server executes ASPX and produces XHTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It gives you back this much data when you give a request and the response comes back from ASP.NET server. Okay. So remember that I'll show you that what is XHTML and how it works and all those things shortly. But remember, it is XHTML, which I can say in short form, HTML, which follows XML's rules. Okay. So remember that we will come across that shortly. Now, this is the architecture of ASP.NET. I don't want to go in depth of this particular diagram, but then this is just the way in which ASP.NET is structured. At the bottom level, you have Windows Server. Okay, when I say Windows Server, please note that is the operating system which is running in your server side hardware. I hope you get the flow. Okay, there is a server side hardware which is the CPU, which is running an OS called Windows Server 2000 or 2008 or 2000 maybe 9 or not sure. Okay, 2008 is the last one I've seen. Anyway, let it be there. OS is there. Inside that operating system, inside that server machine, you have to install a software called Internet Information Services or server, which is actually bundled along with your operating system, which means even in your laptop now there is IIS. You just need to enable it and you can start using it. Every laptop, every Windows machine which has Windows OS which you buy will have IIS in it. You need not install it separately. It's part of your operating system. And then you have your runtime. Now, what is the .NET runtime? What is ASP.NET runtime? CLR. Okay, that is there on top. So CLR will be part of your IIS and which will in turn execute it on your Windows server. Now, anyway, apart from that, on top, you see there's a big block, a big chunk has been given for one word called XML based configuration. Now, please note, XML became very famous recently, but then XML was used extensively by Microsoft companies from the beginning. Okay, if you have noticed, there is a difference between, let's say, doc and docx. Okay, you have XLS and XLSX. Okay, that X actually stands for XML, which is the base of all .NET applications. Whenever they started using extensible architecture, they brought in the X in at the end. For example, ASP, it was named as .ASP, but now it is .ASPX. What we are going to learn is ASPX. It's XML based configuration, and you have a lot of things inside that. You have HTML based controls, you have server based controls, you have user based controls, you have Ajax controls, you have handlers which will take care. By the way, we will be only interacting with the top part. Okay, bottom part we can interact with using code. HTTP handlers, pages, services, web services, sessions, authentication, that's state management, that's what I said. And then application of your entire web application can be cached, cache, all these things can be part of your ASP.NET architecture. Okay, this is just the technical part of it. Now, how does it work? Okay, traditional web pages, how static pages work. Okay, they have static HTML, they have static images, they have some CSS, and they execute the code on the client side. Please understand this. If I write a simple web page which does not involve PHP or Python or anything, what happens is that data, whatever you have, is stored in a HTML page in a server. Now, when I give a request, basically what it does not execute the code, it just transfers the code from the server to the client. and it gets executed on the client side. So what did the server do? Server just gave you the file. You are executing it. Okay, please understand that is how a static page works. If it is a static HTML, you have the file. When you request the server returns that file as it is. It does not execute it. For example, you request an HTML file, it sends all the HTML code back to your client. The client executes and shows you the output. They are mostly simple operations. You cannot do complicated operations in a static HTML page. Okay, remember that. But what about .NET? What about ASP.NET? What does it do? It executes code on the server side. Okay, which can allow you to access databases, which can allow you to create dynamic pages, and you have high security level, and then gives back only HTML so that the browser will display what is required. Okay, everything else will be taken care by the server, not by the client. That is an advantage of using ASP.NET or any other web technology for that sake. Now, I told you that the first benefit of ASP.NET is this: separating visualization from business logic. This is something which is very, very, what do you call, essential, or it's the key part or key highlight of ASP.NET. Okay. Now, traditional web development, I'm talking about using server-side technology like PHP, ASP even, Python or traditional Python, not Django or Flask. Okay, and you have Perl, Ruby, all these things when you use, normally they keep HTML and programming code in single file. Okay, please understand this. You keep both in the same file. You would have done PHP based applications. Most of you have done it. Okay, and even JSP. When we use JSP also, we do the same thing. We write HTML code. In the same place, we write Java code or PHP code. Now, for example, you know that if you want to introduce PHP into the page, you have to rename it into .php. And after renaming it into .php, you will write less than question mark PHP, question mark greater than. Whatever you write inside this is considered as programming. Outside that is considered as HTML. Okay, same thing we did it in JSP, if you remember. Less than percentage, percentage greater than. Whatever you write inside that less than percentage and percentage greater than is considered as Java. Outside whatever is there is considered as HTML. Okay, so basically what we were doing traditionally is to keep HTML and the programming code in one file. We keep it in one file, and it is very hard to read, understand and maintain if it is a huge application. Okay, whatever we have done, it's easy to understand because it's a simple application. But imagine creating a huge enterprise level application. At that time, it becomes difficult to read, difficult to understand, also to maintain. That's very, very important. And it's also difficult to test and debug because both HTML as well as logic is in the same page. Okay, remember this. But what does ASP.NET do? What does ASP.NET offer me? Okay, I want you to understand this, very important. Okay, ASP.NET splits your web page into two parts. Okay, just like how you have seen in Android, .aspx file contains HTML for visualization. What did we have in Android? We had .xml file containing XML for visualization. And then we have code behind the code, which is connected to that XML file. For example, you have an activity, you have activity underscore main.xml and main activity.java. Like that, you have a .aspx file which contains HTML, and you have a .cs file if you are using C#. If you are using VB, you'll have .vb file which contains the logic, or the business logic or presentation logic for a particular page. Okay, this is very important, guys. Understand this. Okay, it splits the page into two parts. One part for HTML, for design, the other part for logic, code behind for the files. Okay, remember this. This is the what do you call, why I'm keeping this on the first page itself is because this is the one unique thing which differentiates other web technologies with .NET. Okay, this is the same thing what I just told. The file name will be in Android we had it as activity underscore main.xml. Here we have testform.aspx. Any name you want to give, .aspx. Okay, where will this code be stored? Same file name, testform.aspx.cs. That will contain the C# file. All are coming from a namespace called system.web.ui.page. Okay, that is technical, you need not remember, but then the way they are naming, you should remember that. Okay, file name.aspx will contain the HTML code which is required for visualization, and the file name.aspx.cs will contain the C# code which will have the logic. Okay, remember this part. Now with this, let me go to the execution. Just look at the diagram and try to understand how it works. Okay, since this is a compiled language, okay, I'm repeating it again. This is a compiled language. All right, because you're going to write code in C sharp. Okay, C sharp is not a scripting language. You cannot just execute it and get the output. You will have to compile it, right? So just imagine a program in Java or any compiled language. Imagine I've created a program. I think I've asked this before, but I'm repeating it again. Imagine I wrote a program to generate Fibonacci series, and I ran the program. Okay, I have a file called fibo.java. I compiled it. I got fibo.class. I ran it. It asked me enter limit. So I gave 5. Okay, and Java gave me 5 Fibonacci series, Fibonacci numbers. Okay, now I want to generate 10 numbers. Should I compile and run it again? Or can I just run the program once again? I hope you get the question, right? You need not compile it once again. The reason is you have not changed anything in the code. You're only changing the input. Okay, so same thing here. Look at this code. Okay, you have Internet Explorer and then you have parser. When I say Internet Explorer, why that diagram shows Internet Explorer is because it's a Microsoft technology. They will not leave any other browser in the middle. So they will obviously recommend either Internet Explorer or Edge. Let's ignore that. We can use Chrome also. But anyway, you have a file name. Just say, for example, here hello.aspx. You are giving that to the server side. Okay, the dotted line in the middle just shows that there's a distinction. This is your client and this is your server. In the server, what happens? You pass an aspx file. It gets parsed. Okay, when I say parsed, please note there are two files coming. ASPX means it also needs to call aspx.cs. ASPX will be parsed. CS will be compiled. I hope you can get the flow. I told there'll be two people, right? There'll be an ASPX file and there'll be a .aspx.cs file, which means ASPX is HTML based or XML based visualization code, which needs to be parsed. Okay, I'll show that shortly. You'll understand why it's getting parsed, and then you have compiled. So when you do parsing and compiling, what will be the output of that? You have already answered to me in the previous question. It will give you an assembly. Okay, you told me both the answers. You gave me an answer saying that it is assembly, and then also you told it is an intermediate language. So assembly IL. When I say that, you understand that it is an intermediate language. That's all. Okay, it is getting created. Also remember the word which is there, cache. Okay, there is a cache of assembly. What do you mean by that? See, once a program has been compiled and run successfully, you will not compile that program again unless you have changed the code. I hope you can get the flow. All right. Just because I changed my input doesn't mean that you should compile the program. You should only compile the program once again if you have changed anything in the code. I hope you have got it clear. Okay, so when will this parsing and compilation process happen? The very first time you run. After you have deployed a web application, the first time you run, it will get parsed and it will get compiled, and the intermediate language code will be stored in the server. Okay, in its assembly cache place. Now look at the server, the next diagram. Okay, I hope you can follow. I don't know whether you can see the mouse, but anyway, the parser here parses it and the compiler here compile. This two process will only happen once, and once it is compiled, you store it in an assembly intermediate language. That's like an exe file, what you told, or a DLL file. It can be anything. Assembly, it's an assembly, that's all. Okay, it's an assembly cache and it is stored here. Now when I say memory, I'm not talking about the hard disk. This is the hard disk, but this is not the hard disk I'm talking about. This memory means the RAM of your server. Okay, so the assembly IL is now loaded onto the memory of my server and it returns an output. Now, this is the first call to a particular page. I wanted to just notice this. This is the first call to a particular page. What happens the second time you call that same page? Okay, maybe the data is different, but your code is not getting compiled again. So I can ignore that entire phase of parsing and compiling. This is the second diagram, guys. Any other call after the first call, what would I do? I would not go to parsing and compiling it again and again. Rather, I'll just directly go to the assembly cache. Whatever is there, I'll execute it because it's already there in memory. I'll immediately give you the output. I hope you follow what is happening here. I'll repeat again. First call, you parse, you compile, you get the cache, you store it in memory, and next time till the server is restarted. The server never gets restarted. So till you change that assembly cache or recompile it again, it will be stored in memory. And you have this, and the next time you give a request, it just directly pulls it from the cache and then executes and gives you a response. So it's much faster. Now, what happens if I'm using PHP? What happens if I use Perl or Ruby or whatever, any of those scripting languages? This skipping of process will never happen. That's something which you need to understand between a compiled and a scripted or a scripting language. Okay, so here these are past languages like PHP. Imagine if I wrote a PHP code. Every time you run, I have to run that PHP code again. You cannot store it in memory and call it again because there's no compilation process. Okay, I hope you get this idea. This is the ASP.NET execution model. All right. Let's see a simple program before we wind up for today. I'll just show you a hello world in ASP.NET. From tomorrow's class, we'll go a little bit into the programming part. Okay. I'm going to create a new project. Please do be very careful of how you create a web application in for our syllabus. Okay. Please note this. I'm going to click on create a new project. Okay. And you have a lot of templates here. Okay. I have let me just choose all and keep. Okay, there are a lot of things available on this side. I hope you can see a few. All right, there is console application, then there is ASP.NET Core, like that. A lot of things are there. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that I don't accidentally choose a different language. So first thing I'm going to do is choose the language to C#. I'm going to leave the language to C# because I'm not going to use anything else, guys. You can try any other language you want if you want to develop web applications in different languages. But for our syllabus, I'm going to use C#. So I'm going to keep this as C#. And what type of project would I like to develop? I'm going to choose, there are a lot of things available in that drop down. I'm just going to choose web, C# web. You can see the first option which you get here is ASP.NET Core web application. Okay, this is not what we are covering in this semester, in this syllabus. Please do realize that I'm not going to choose that. Okay, the advantage of using that is a lot because it's going to be from the scratch, it's going to be MVC and all, but better we learn ASP.NET web application first properly using .NET framework, and then we will go to all these other things. Okay, so you can see there are a lot of other apps on this list. Let me just scroll down and find this. I want you to be very careful of what you are choosing when you create a new web application. After you have chosen at least once, it will come in the recent template, so it's easy for you to choose what you want. Last class I've chosen console app using .NET Core. I was just doing console, so Core does not make a big difference for me. But now web application onwards, Core will make a little bit more difference for me. So I am going to use, I'm going to find something with C# and web chosen. I need to get this template. Okay, I wanted to be very careful when you create this template. It should not be .NET Core for our subject. If you want to learn, you can learn it on your own. But then here, for this, make sure that the bracket says .NET Framework ASP.NET Web Application. Please choose this and then we'll go to the next. Okay, I need to give a project name. So let's give Hello ASP. I'll just give this and don't change anything else. It's going to be the same. It's just the solution name and what framework you're using in that particular project, and etc. etc. You can choose whichever framework you would like. Normally it will choose the highest or the latest available framework. Let me just choose that and click on create. When you do that, Visual Studio will ask one more thing to you. What kind of a new ASP.NET web application would you like to create? Okay, please note it's saying create a new web ASP.NET application, correct? But what type? Okay, I just want you to go through the 5 options which are given here. All right, I'm going to start with empty, then I'll move to web forms, then I'll move to MVC. The last 2 is to create an API, which we will learn in while doing web services. And the last one is a single page application, SPA. Most of you would have come across these kind of applications. Recently, it's becoming more famous because some web applications, if you see, it will all be in one page. Okay, it requires lots of JavaScript and Ajax based things so that you can get everything in one page and get the output. It's a single page application, which is also possible using ASP.NET. That's why they have shown all these templates to you. Now, if you focus on that icon which is there, that icon just has a few things. Just want you to see that. small window is there, and then a small globe kind of a symbol is there, then 4 is there on top. Okay, these just mean that this is a web application using .NET 4. Okay, the version of .NET which is used is 4. That's all. So now let me just read the not read exactly, but I'll just tell you what these are. Empty, an empty project template, which means it will create an ASP.NET web application empty, which means nothing will be there. You will have to create even from the home page, the default page onwards. You will have to create everything on your own. That's why it's called an empty project. Second is a template which has a predefined template already there. It will create a few things for you already and keep it. I'll not use it this class. From next class onwards, we'll do that. But this class, I would like you to just choose a simple empty project and then we'll work on it. Okay, so I'm going to choose empty and then click on create. MVC I'll be taking towards the end because that's there in our syllabus towards the end. So let me just focus on these two in the coming classes. Okay, in this class alone I'll be using empty. From the next class we'll choose web forms. Okay, web forms will have a full-fledged website, already working website with home, about and contact. With that remaining you have to add, like that it will be there. Let me not use it now. Let me just go to empty and click on create. So it's creating a project called Hello ASP. And once you create, you will just get an overview and all those things. This is just a HTML page which is shown to you. You can close it. It's not required. Okay. Let me just go to Solution Explorer. Now you can see there is no HTML file, nothing. There are some properties, there are some references, some configuration file. But apart from that, no ASPX file. Nothing is available here, which means it's an empty project. You will have to create your own. So let's do that now. Now, before I proceed to that, imagine I'm creating a simple web application, a website. Okay. When I open a particular website, I need a file which will be like the leader file, which means as soon as you call a particular website or a particular folder in your WAMP or exam, this file will automatically be called even without you writing the name. What is that file name called as? Anyone? If you name a file with this keyword, it will be automatically called as soon as you call. Perfect. Index. I hope you have come across that word in a lot of web technologies. Okay. If you have index.html, it will be the first one to be called even without you telling call index.html. Okay. For example, if I create a folder and in that folder, I have index.html. In the URL, all I need to do is localhost / folder name. File will be automatically called because index.html is there. What if I don't have index.html? Okay, I have a.html, b.html, c.html inside a folder, and I call the folder name in my browser. What would be the output? What would I get as the output? Anyone? If I don't have the word called index and I just gave a.html, b.html and c.html and I call that folder name directly, what would I get? Not exactly empty. The list of files. Perfect. You will just get the list of files inside that folder. Okay, because it does not know which file to pull to show to you. But if you put as index.php or index.html, it automatically understands that that is the file to be called without even you explicitly telling to call that. In .NET, it is not going to be the same. We are not going to have the word called index.aspx. Okay, please remember this. In .NET, two keywords are allowed, and one is having 90% preference, default. The keyword should be default.aspx. The other possible choice is home.aspx. Okay, so remember that. With that, let me just create, let me right click on that project name. Please note, this is my project, Hello ASP. I'm going to right click on that project name and I'm going to click on add and say add new item. Let me just add a new item. In this one, you have a lot of templates again. So I'm going to choose web forms and I'm going to choose the first one. I'll talk about master pages in the next class. I'll just choose a web form. You can see the file name here, webform1.aspx. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you keep like that, there'll be a small problem that it will not be called automatically. You will have to manually write this is the index page. So I want to just name it as default.aspx. this will be the file name which will be looked by your IIS server. Okay, the server which is running .NET applications, especially ASP.NET applications, will specifically look for this file to show. If this file does not exist, it shows the list of files. I hope you follow. Okay, let me just click on add. So a simple default.aspx file is getting added. I hope the code is visible to you. Okay, this is I'll just show the file name here. It's default.aspx. Okay, inside that you have some code. That's all. Okay, if those who have worked with Dreamweaver will have this a little bit more clear, because at the bottom of the Dreamweaver you will see something called design, source, split. Okay, like that same thing. Visual Studio is giving you a design phase. Okay, right now nothing is there because I don't have anything in the code. Okay, you can put here, you can type here, whatever you want, just like Dreamweaver. Okay, and then you have source, which has the HTML part. If you say split, here will be the code, here will be the design. You can see this. Okay, when I say code, I'm not talking about programming code, guys. I'm only talking about the XML or HTML based markup language code. That's all. Okay, so remember this. Let me go back to source. You can see that there is the first line itself is not actually HTML, if you notice that. Okay, and I think most of you would have come across this symbol. I think all of you have come across this symbol in JSP. What is this called as in JSP? Anybody remembers? Less than percentage at. Anybody? If you remember, we had expressions less than percentage equal to, less than percentage at. Anybody? Directive. Good. Okay, just remember that less than percentage at means it's a directive. We had page directive, tag lib. You have a lot of things like that in JSP. In ASPX, same idea. Less than percentage at means directive. Okay, what is the written there on the top line is the page directive. It just gives instructions to that page programmatically, what language is used. Okay, I can ignore a few things. I'll just tell a few things. Again, code behind is default.aspx.cs. We'll be seeing all these things shortly. I am not going to focus on all, but I wanted to focus on at least two. This page directive has one attribute called language. Which language is this page going to follow? It's going to follow C#. And where is that C# file? It is default.aspx.cs. My file name is default.aspx, which is the design. The logic, the presentation of the business logic will be available in default.aspx.cs. Okay, where would I find this? Just right click on the page anywhere and then say view code. You can see that view code. If you do that, it will open default.aspx.cs. This is the C# file. Okay, of the same page called default.aspx. Let me go to the Solution Explorer now and let me show you that. Okay, in the Solution Explorer, you see that there is default.aspx. That's it. Okay, but if I see that there's a small opening tag here, let me just open it and see there is default.aspx.cs. Okay, which means this file will be now all merged into one. One will be parsed, one will be compiled, but both will be converted into an intermediate language so that your browser will give you a proper output. So that's all. Okay, this is how your default.aspx is located. Now, since time is almost up, let me just keep a quick thing. Let me just run it. How do I run this particular program? Okay, let me just put a hello world. I'm not going to the code part. In the design part itself, I can just type hello world from ASP. I'll do more in the next class. Since there's no time, I'll just put this and keep it here. I'm just selecting it and pressing Ctrl B. It just gave me something like this. Let me go to the source and see what has happened. Okay, you can see the code here. There was a div tag. Inside the div tag, whatever I typed has become a tag. Strong hello world from ASP.NET. That's all. Okay, so let me just run it. How do I run it? Just like how you had in NetBeans, you have a play button here. You can choose which one to run. Okay, since my default browser is Google Chrome, it's showing, but please note it's using the word IIS Express. Okay, what does it mean? It is not going to use your full-fledged IIS which is there in your system, because it may be enabled, may be disabled in your machine. But if you use Visual Studio, just like how NetBeans had, it has its own way of running the server. So we need not do anything. All we need to do is just click on this button, says IIS Express in whichever browser you would like to run it in. Okay, whatever the default will be shown, you can change it in that setting there itself. and then run it. Okay, and this is just certificate. Let's not ask it again. Let's say yes. Um, let's see what happens. Here you can see, let me just open that Visual Studio once again. Okay, I think once the program is stopped, I'll show that. Okay, let me go back to the browser. Let's see what happens. A new Chrome has been opened up and default.aspx is getting executed. I hope you can see that default.aspx is getting run, and it is now loading. The server, once it loads, next time it will be faster. Okay, the server is running as IIS Express, and it's going to give you an output which is nothing with respect to what we saw in the ASPX file, because it has to be converted totally into HTML. By the time it loads, let me just have a quick glance of the code which is there in your browser or in Visual Studio. You see, this is not understood by HTML or your browser, and this is also not understood by your browser. Okay, let me go back and see whether it has come. It has come. Okay, now you see there is an output coming here. Hello world from ASP.NET. Let me right click and then say view page source. Let's see the source, what came back to the browser. Okay, this is what has come back to the browser. The page directive is missing. HTML, everything else is there. Form has something extra. I have got my code is there, but apart from that, there's some extra things and all have been added. I'll tell you what these things are later, but .NET will take care of this. You need not bother about it at all. Okay, there is by default a form kept, action is the same page, etc., etc. Whatever you need to do, .NET will take care of that, but we just need to write, put the code and then make sure that it runs. That's all. Okay, this is introduction to ASP.NET. If you have any questions, you can ask, guys. Otherwise, we'll stop with this for this class. We'll continue in the next class.